I have always overcome great difficulties with great enthusiasm, and I have always succeeded, especially when I was young. But time has changed. On February 18th, just 2 months before my 51st birthday, the unimaginable happened. I had a heart attack. I was on the pool deck, sipping a Corona and waiting for the coals on my smoker to heat up. At first, I thought my last gulp of beer had gone down the wrong way, but as the pain worsened, I realized something was terribly wrong. The pain was intense and rapidly escalating, as if someone were standing on my chest. I could feel and even hear my heart racing out of control. I collapsed, first to my knees and then onto my back, struggling to breathe. Thank God for cell phones, because that's what saved my life. I reached into my shorts, pulled out my phone, and dialed 911. I don't remember if I said help or anything else, but within minutes, I heard a loud crash, and a lot of people were suddenly working on me. I must have blacked out because the next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, being told I was about to undergo surgery. "Mr. Moore, can you hear me?" a voice asked. "We need to perform a heart bypass immediately. Do you understand?" I nodded. They put a clipboard under my hand and I signed something, maybe a release form, or perhaps an order for Girl Scout cookies. I had no idea, nor did I care. I just wanted the pain to end. "Is there anyone we should contact?" a nurse asked. My wife, is she here?" I asked. "Number you were alone when the paramedics arrived. I'll have someone check on that as soon as possible," she replied. "Now try to relax. We're heading to the operating room and you should be fine." At that moment, I think I had a vague idea of what was happening, but nothing was really sinking in as they wheeled me into an elevator and then into a large, brightly lit room. "Take a deep breath, and when you wake up, it'll all be over," the doctor assured me. I didn't see my life flash before my eyes. There was no out-of-body experience, and thankfully, no bright light at the end of a tunnel. I just woke up in the recovery room with a middle-aged nurse standing over me, checking my pulse. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I tried to respond, but my mouth was too dry. My mind was alert, but my body wasn't cooperating. "Don't worry, you'll feel much better in a few hours. Just get some sleep." She was right. The next time I woke up, I felt both better and worse at the same time. Sitting next to my bed was Sandy, my wife of 28 years. "Are you all right?" When I got home, the neighbors told me what happened. "The doctor said you're going to be just fine," she said with a smile. My mouth was still dry, so when I tried to speak, the words barely came out. "Leave me alone," I started to say, but it was barely a whisper. "What are you trying to say?" Sandy asked, leaning closer to hear. "Get out of my sight and leave me the hell alone," I said loud enough for her to hear this time. "Honey, don't try to talk. Just lie back and rest. I'll be right here," she said, gently touching my cheek. At that moment, my heart rate skyrocketed, my face flushed, and a nurse rushed into my room to see what was happening. "Leave me the hell alone," I yelled at her. "Miss, you need to leave. You're distressing the patient and causing his vitals to spike. Please, leave now," she said to Sandy. "But I'm his wife," Sandy stammered. "Regardless, you're upsetting him, and I need you to leave immediately." "Honey, I'll be in the hallway if you need me," Sandy said, glancing back at me as she was escorted out of the room. I signaled the nurse to come closer. "No visitors, please," I told her, "and only discuss my condition with me, no one else." "I understand, Mr. Moore. I'll place a sign on your door indicating no visitors allowed, and I'll ensure the doctor only discusses your condition with you. Is there anything else you need?" she asked. I shook my head no. "In that case, please try to relax and get some rest. The doctor will be in later to check on you. You don't get any rest in a hospital. If they're not poking you, they're drawing blood or trying to give you some damn pill in the middle of the night." Sleep, yeah, right, I thought to myself. The doctor entered and informed me that everything had gone as planned. They had performed a triple bypass, and when they opened me up, they found signs of other damage from a previous attack, as they like to call it. I told him it probably happened about 3 months ago, but I had assumed it was just a stress episode. You're very lucky, Mr. Moore. If you hadn't had your cell phone, you might not have made it, he explained. You really need to get your weight and blood pressure under control, or you'll end up seeing me again, he added while reviewing my chart. I want you out of bed tomorrow morning. You need to start walking at least 10 minutes every hour, and we'll take it from there. How long will I be laid up, Doc? If you're asking when you can go back to work, it'll be at least 2 months. When you go home, you'll need someone with you at all times, at least for the first couple of weeks. After that, we'll see how you're doing. Doc, I won't be recovering at home, so can you recommend a good facility? Well, there's a decent one about 3 miles from here with a great workout area and a dietitian on staff, he said. Just have our business office arrange it for you. But I should warn you, it's a bit expensive, though it has an excellent reputation. By the way, you've had a lot of visitors, and some of them got pretty upset when they were told you didn't want any visitors or calls, he said with a puzzled smile. I suppose you have your reasons, but I wouldn't want to be in your shoes when you go home, he remarked as he walked out the door. Who said I was going home? I thought. A week later, I found myself in a private room at the rehabilitation center. The room overlooked an outdoor pond and felt more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. After a thorough physical examination, I was asked how long I intended to stay. Let's plan for 2 months and reassess after that, I told the coordinator. Mr. Wilson, you're about 65 pounds above your ideal weight and not in the best physical condition. We need to get you into the gym and establish an exercise routine. But first, we're going to set you up with a solid nutritional program to help bring your weight down. It won't be easy, but if you follow the staff's guidance, you'll see progress. With that in mind, let me take you to the gym so you can get started. Well, you've got me for the next 2 months, so do whatever you think is best, I said with a laugh as we began putting a recovery plan in motion. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. The reason is simple. I'm really good at what I do for a living. I'm not saying that to brag or boost my ego, it's just a fact. I have a talent for finding the right people for the job, ensuring they're well-trained, and then letting them do what they were hired to do. I learned a long time ago that I couldn't do it all myself. I tried for a while, but it nearly killed me. Now I delegate and let others handle their responsibilities. I assign them a project, explain the client's expectations, and then step back to let them excel. Life is good now. You see, I'm the sales manager for a marketing firm. I've been with the company for 26 years, and a couple of years ago, I became a silent partner. No one, and I mean no one, not even my wife, knows this. 5 years ago, I took a 25% pay cut to buy into the company. I've got 5 more years to go, and I'll be a 50% owner alongside my buddy Ken. Sounds like I've got it all figured out, right? Well, I do when it comes to my business life, but my personal life is a different story. I have 2 spoiled kids and a social climbing wife. My youngest, John, barely made it through college and was more than a little upset when I didn't offer him a job at the company. I told him, family and business don't mix. But between us, I didn't want to be the one to fire him when his laziness caught up with him. He did find a nice girl and got married, but he still asks me for money every other month. I suppose I never learned to say no to him, but that's about to change. Tina, who's 2 years older than John, is a perpetual student. I think she's on the 6-year graduation plan. She's changed her major 3 times, and I have no idea what it is now, but it doesn't matter. At the start of this school year, I told her she had 1 semester left to finish, and after that, she's on her own. She went to her mother to complain, and when Sandy brought it up to me, I told her enough was enough. You get where I'm going with this, don't you? I'm done being the nice guy with an open checkbook. At 25 and 27 years old, I shouldn't have to support them anymore. And I'm not going to. They're officially off my payroll. As for my wife, Sandy, that's a different story. About 3 months ago, I was feeling a bit frisky one evening. Our intimacy life had diminished significantly over the past year, and I was trying to rekindle it to where it should be. I'm not asking for intimacy 5 times a week, but 3 times would be nice. So, where was I? Oh yes, after dinner I offered her a glass of wine and asked if she was in the mood. For what? You know, how about we head upstairs and have a little fun? I said, with my most enticing smile. I'm a bit tired tonight and I have that party to plan for, was her response. Come on, hun. It's not like I'm asking for a kidney, just a bit of affection. I should have realized that things weren't going to go as planned when Sandy seemed to be full of enthusiasm, like a person sitting in a dentist's chair waiting for a root canal to be removed. We went to bed to have some fun, but that's when the complaints started. I was taking up too much space, she was too hot, I was sweating, she was outraged all the time. I couldn't stand it and stopped everything. Where are you going? She asked. To take care of myself alone, so that I no longer have to listen to you complain about how unpleasant it is to be around me, I replied, slamming the door behind me. I handled the situation on my own, and as soon as I finished, I went to our spare bedroom. Where are you going now? She called after me. Away from you until I say something I'll regret later, I replied, slamming the door again. She was right. I've gained a lot of weight in the last few years. I probably should have taken better care of myself, but I've become complacent. I started playing golf mainly to attract new customers, but I didn't really like it and I wasn't very good at it. The only advantage of joining a country club was the constant variety of activities. The next morning I left long before Sandy woke up. I was still upset, although I calmed down a bit. I guess it wasn't just her fault, I muttered to myself, sitting at my desk and eating a donut, followed by a second cup of coffee. Around 10 a.m., I received an email from Sandy from work. There was no apology, no expression of love, just a message explaining that she wasn't in the mood last night and that instead of talking to her about it, I left in a rage. I put down my coffee and tried to remember the last time we had what I would call a full-fledged, intimate experience. Lately, it was just a routine. She didn't show any initiative. The relationship really went downhill, and it seems Sandy preferred to avoid intimacy rather than engage in it with me. That's when it hit me. Maybe she's meeting her needs elsewhere. I decided to face the truth and see what happens. What could happen in the worst case? Will she leave me? I replied with the following letter. Whatever you are doing, whoever you are with, you better stop right now if you want to stay married to me. As soon as I clicked send, I realized that I would provoke some kind of reaction, but I hoped that she would at least wait until I got home to respond. Sandy sent me a scathing email, berating me for daring to accuse her of cheating. She claimed that I was the issue with our intimacy life, not her. She mocked me for getting winded from just climbing 2 flights of stairs, suggesting that perhaps she should get an oxygen tank for our bedroom on nights when I wanted intimacy. These were among the more benign remarks she made. Her final comment was that I should move to the guest room permanently, so she wouldn't be held responsible if I had a heart attack. My reply was brief and straightforward. So be it. That night I didn't go home for dinner. Instead, I ate with my partner, Ken. I considered not going home at all, but decided against it, thinking it might make things worse. Sandy was waiting for me when I walked through the door. "How dare you accuse me of cheating?" she yelled. I've never been unfaithful throughout our marriage. Well, if you're not getting it from me anymore, you must be getting it elsewhere, I retorted, standing my ground. I'm tired, and since all you're going to do is yell, I'm going to bed. So, I guess you're not sleeping in our bedroom anymore? She said sarcastically. What's the point? You don't want me there, and I don't go where I'm not wanted, I replied as I climbed the stairs. Sleep by yourself. See if I care, Sandy screamed after me. It was then that I first felt a sharp pain in my chest. Each step was excruciating, but I pressed on. I barely made it to the top of the stairs before I had to brace myself against the wall to avoid collapsing. I reached the spare room, fell onto the bed fully clothed, and passed out. When I finally woke up and checked my watch, I saw it was already 2:30 p.m. I can't let her get to me like that, I muttered to myself as I headed to the bathroom. I splashed water on my face and stared into the mirror, displeased with what I saw. I need to pull myself together, I said, stripping off my sweat-soaked clothes. The next morning, I slept in until nearly 9 a.m. The house was quiet since Sandy had already left. I called work to request a vacation day and decided to visit my doctor instead of staying home. You need to lose at least 50 pounds, he said, and your blood pressure is dangerously high. I'm going to prescribe something to lower it, but if you don't start taking better care of yourself, you're heading for serious problems, he warned. I'd heard this before, especially over the past 2 years. I had tried dieting, but it just wasn't something I enjoyed, so I didn't stick with it. I told him I'd attempt to lose some weight and take the medication. He scheduled a follow-up appointment for 3 months later, and I left with a calorie chart and 2 diet plans. I tossed them onto the back seat of the car. Things around the house grew cold at best. We stopped eating together and only communicated when absolutely necessary. By the end of our second month of silence, we began speaking again, though there were no apologies. Our conversations were limited to trivial topics or about the kids. Saturday marked the annual charity auction at the club. Steve, are you going? Sandy asked. Yes, I'll be there, I responded. Then we might as well go together. Is your tux ready? She inquired, cleaned, pressed, and ready to go. The ride to the club was quiet. We exchanged small talk until I decided to address the issue. I'm sorry, I said, keeping my eyes on the road. I am too, Sandy replied. I've missed you and don't want to fight anymore. That was all the time we had before we arrived at the club. I handed my keys to the valet and received the claim ticket in return. I then walked around to open Sandy's door and offered her my hand. She took it with a smile, making my heart race. We entered the dining room and found our table. Dinner was fine, but the wine was exceptional. I had ordered 4 bottles for our table, and with the other 3 couples, we toasted to our good health. After dinner, the band started playing, and people began dancing. I danced one slow dance with Sandy, which was more than enough for me. She asked if it was okay to dance with a few other men. No problem, I told her. I was walking around the room, catching up with a few friends, when I noticed Sandy on the dance floor. They were dancing slowly, and the man with her was unfamiliar to me. His hand started at her waist, but gradually moved down until it was resting on her backside. After a couple of dances, they stepped outside to the moonlit patio, and I followed, keeping a low profile. They were too far for me to hear their conversation, but their body language was unmistakable. When he leaned in and kissed her, I'd seen enough. Not staying for the auction? Asked the parking lot attendant. There's nothing in there I want anymore, I replied as I got into my car and drove away. About 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Guess who? I turned it off and set it on the seat beside me. I had been home for about 2 hours when Sandy burst in. What the hell is your problem? Why did you just leave me like that? she shouted. I thought you two wanted to be alone, I said. What are you talking about, Steve? The dark-haired man, the patio, the kiss. I saw everything, I told her. That was nothing, she retorted. Nothing? Are you saying a man kissing my wife is nothing? I beg to differ, Sandy. And I suppose you've made it a habit to let men grope you while you dance with them? Everyone saw what happened on the dance floor. Or was I just imagining it? I asked. It's not what it looked like, Steve. I should have asked Rick to move his hand, but it was just innocent flirting, she explained. And the kiss was just a thank you for dancing with him. I went to look for you right after that. And it took you 2 hours to get back home? Since you weren't answering your phone, I had to find someone to give me a ride. Let me guess. Rick just happened to offer you a ride. Am I right? Yes, it was Rick, and no, nothing happened, she tried to reassure me as I started to walk away. Damn it! Nothing happened, Steve, she repeated. How long has it been? I asked. How long has what been? How long ago did you give up on us? I said, heading toward my new and permanent room. God damn it, Steve, I didn't do anything, she yelled as she started to cry. I guess it was right after I gave up on myself, I replied, before closing and locking the bedroom door. I stayed in the bedroom all day Sunday. I slept in and spent a lot of time reflecting on how my life had turned out. I had 2 ungrateful kids who only contacted me when they needed something, and a wife with whom I was merely cohabitating, more like a sister. I needed to get away for a few days. Our lake cabin was about an hour's drive from home. It had originally belonged to my parents, and after they passed away, I bought out my brother's share and renovated the interior. On Monday, I packed a few things and headed out there. A quick call to work, and I was free for the next 4 days. I just needed some time alone to sort through things without Sandy constantly around. When I opened the door, I immediately knew something was off. I hadn't been there in at least 4 months, and when I left, the place was spotless. Someone had been there since then. An empty wine bottle was on the counter, and a quick check revealed that our bed had been used. Not just used, but someone had clearly had intimacy on it. There was a ring on the white sheets where the wet spot had been. Well, I now know where and with whom, I muttered to myself as I dragged the mattress outside and threw it onto the lawn. My heart raced, and I was drenched in sweat as I sat down in a chair on the porch. Steve, old buddy, it looks like you've been replaced, I said angrily. Forget them all. I don't need them anymore. I used to, but not anymore. Over the next 4 days, I made a list of what I wanted from life and where I wanted to go, none of which included any of my family. It was like a bucket list, but without the need to kick the bucket. I got home late Friday afternoon, but Sandy was nowhere to be found. She didn't come home that night, so by Saturday afternoon, I decided to smoke a rack or 2 of ribs and wait for her. I was almost eager to hear her explanation for her absence over the past 2 days when everything came crashing down and I had a heart attack. So this brings us to where I am now. I finally reached out to Ken from the rehab facility to let him know I'm still alive and kicking. They wouldn't connect your calls, he said. How are you feeling? Better, but still quite weak. It looks like I'll be laid up for a few months. I need Judy to bring my laptop so I can stay in touch and keep up with things. Do you think that's a good idea? Ken asked. Don't worry, I won't overdo it. Between Judy and me, we'll keep everything up to date, I assured him. By the way, your wife was here the other day. She took something off your desk. I think it was that photo of the 2 of you. Is everything all right? He inquired. Better than ever. Just have Judy drop off my laptop, and for heaven's sake, don't let anyone know where I am. I really don't need any visitors, I told him. And by the way, I'm taking full advantage of our health insurance, I added with a laugh. That's what it's there for. Just focus on getting better and let me know if you need anything, buddy. Those bastards. I muttered after the second week. First, they pushed me to my limits in the gym, and now they were feeding me barely enough to survive. I've seen bigger appetizers, I said to myself, staring at my dinner plate. I was working out 4 times a day and eating meals barely enough for a baby, but I was losing weight. After about 5.5 weeks, I was less irritable and starting to find my rhythm. The food was terrible and never enough, but I liked the changes happening to me. I could walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes without oxygen. My pants were loose around my waist, and for the first time in a long while, I began to feel better about myself. Damn it, I can do this, I told myself. As the Goodwill truck pulled into the driveway, Sandy initially thought they were just using it to turn around. "Mrs. Moore?" the driver inquired. "Yes, I'm Mrs. Moore," she replied. "I have a pickup order here and was instructed to get in touch with you," he explained. "A pickup order? I didn't request one," she said, puzzled. "I understand, miss. It was arranged by your husband, Steve Moore," he said, showing her his signature at the bottom of the page. "It indicates that we're to collect every item of clothing in the house that belongs to your husband. The note mentioned that the items aren't already packed, so if you wouldn't mind showing me where they are, we can start. We have another pickup scheduled for this afternoon." She led them to Steve's closet and dresser in their bedroom, then took one of the workers downstairs to where his winter clothes were kept. It took them just under an hour to pack everything up and load it onto the truck. She signed their receipt and received her copy before they left. What on earth is he doing? She wondered to herself. After the incident in his room, I wasn't allowed to see or speak with Steve while he was in the hospital. The doctor refused to provide any information about his condition or when he would be discharged. I became very worried when Steve refused to see John or Tina. I understood that he was angry with me, but that didn't justify avoiding his children. On Tuesday, I sneaked into the hospital and made my way up the stairs to his floor. I was determined not to let that nurse stop me again. I waited until she was at the other end of the hall and then dashed into Steve's room. Bursting through the door, I yelled, "Why won't you talk to me?" A confused woman looked at me and said, "I don't know you," as she tried to understand what this frantic woman was doing in her room. "All right, where have you taken Steve Moore?" I demanded of the nurse at the front desk. "I'm sorry, but he's gone," she replied. Tears welled up in my eyes. "When? How?" I asked. "What did they do with his body?" I sobbed. "I'm his wife." "I have a right to know," I said, my anger rising through my tears. "When I said he's gone, I meant he was discharged 2 days ago. For more information, you'll need to visit the office. I have a floor full of patients to attend to," she explained. The business office informed me that Steve had been discharged and sent to a rehab clinic, but they couldn't tell me where due to patient privacy. "Great, back to square one," I muttered to myself as I left the building. Sitting in my car, I contemplated my next steps. Steve was right. I had long given up on us. His weight had ballooned, and whenever I mentioned it, he accused me of nagging. Our intimate moments were no longer enjoyable. He was like a heavy sack lying on top of me. When I complained that he was crushing me, he would get upset and try to shift his weight onto his arms or elbows. At that point, I was just relieved when he finished and got off me. The thought of intimacy with him now made me anxious. We did this about once a month, and usually after he complained for a day or two. You could call it intimacy out of pity. I was getting more and more upset, and that's when Rick showed up. I first met Rick when we came to the country club. They had a monthly dinner and dance, and he always came to them alone. During these events, he danced with all the women. Meanwhile, Steve would go out to drink or eat, and Rick and I would dance together all night. It's been ages since someone hugged me like that. Eventually, we danced a few songs in a row and then sat and chatted on the patio until it was time to leave, or until I noticed that Steve was looking for me. A few months later, we met for lunch on a Saturday when Steve was at a golf game. We enjoyed a couple of glasses of wine and everything seemed so right. We ended up in the back seat of his car and kissing. We did everything except direct contact. It's been so long since I've experienced anything like this. We straightened our clothes, kissed goodbye, and I returned home. I didn't feel guilty until I was in the shower thinking about Rick. What am I doing? I'm having fun with another guy in the back seat of his car, and now I'm trying to stop thinking about him instead of my husband. How confusing is it all? I thought, feeling disgusted with myself. The real problem was that I no longer felt attracted to my husband. For the next 2 weeks, I kept pestering Steve about his weight, trying to make him see how attractive he'd be if he lost 40 pounds, but he never seemed to get the hint. Instead, he just grew increasingly angry with me. Everything came to a head one night after dinner when he wanted to be intimate. The experience was a complete disaster, and he ended up storming off to the bathroom. I felt bad, but not overly so. That night, he slept in the spare room and left before I got up the next morning. The next day at work, I was having an off day. Everything I touched seemed to go wrong. Feeling sorry for myself, I did something foolish and emailed Steve, essentially blaming him for last night's disaster because he had walked out on me. His response was a real shocker. The email simply said, "Whoever I was cheating with, I'd better stop if I want to stay married." I couldn't believe he knew about that Saturday, but if he'd been more attentive at home, it wouldn't have happened. And it wasn't like we had full-blown intimacy, it was just some light fooling around. In hindsight, I shouldn't have responded to his email in my angry state. I unleashed a tirade, calling him everything I could think of. I accused him of being an overweight slob and claimed that if he weren't so out of shape, we'd be having more intimacy. I realize now that I was only driving him further away, and it seems he was fed up with the constant fighting. His reply was that maybe he should just stay permanently in the guest room if I no longer wanted him. Things were spiraling out of control. When Steve got home, we had a massive argument. We threw accusations at each other, and he went one way while I went another. I spent that night alone, and many more nights after that. It was during the charity auction that we finally apologized to each other. The situation had been eating me up inside, but we were both too stubborn to admit we were wrong or to identify the real underlying issue. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner together, and Steve danced with me before deciding to mingle with his friends. I made the mistake of dancing with Rick. We got a bit too close, and on the patio, he expressed his desire to take things further, and then kissed me. I told him it was a mistake, and that I would never cheat on my husband, and left him there. I didn't see Steve leave, nor did anyone else. The parking lot attendant told me he had left about half an hour earlier, and when I tried calling him, it went straight to voicemail. I was furious and had too many drinks before realizing I needed to find a way home. Rick came over and asked what was wrong. Steve got mad and left. He won't answer his phone and I need a ride home, I explained. Sandy, I'll give you a ride home after the auction, he offered. I gave him a skeptical look. And I'll keep my hands to myself, he added reassuringly. I drank through the rest of the auction and was still fuming on the way home. How could he just leave me there? I seethed. Rick noticed my anger and told me to relax. When he pulled into the parking lot by the lake, I was surprised, and when he reached over to kiss me, I didn't stop him. The only reason we didn't go further that night was because a police car was making its rounds through the parking lot. When the patrol car's spotlight hit us, I sobered up instantly. Rick, take me home right now, I demanded. When I got home, I thanked him and hurried inside. I was nearly sober, but still furious. When Steve accused me of cheating, I lost it. What really hurt was when he questioned when I had given up on our marriage. I broke down, crying and insisting that I had never cheated, but he no longer believed me. On Sunday, Steve stayed in his room and I didn't push him. I assumed we'd have a discussion on Monday and wanted to be prepared. When he didn't come home Monday night, I thought he was just trying to punish me. By Tuesday, with his continued absence, I called his secretary, Judy, who informed me that he had taken a few days off for vacation. The jerk is off sulking somewhere, I thought. Well, two can play at that game. On Wednesday, I went to spend a few days with my daughter at college. We had a wonderful time bonding, and on Friday night, we even had a girls' night out with some of her friends. Saturday morning, I woke up with a hangover and a queasy stomach. Guess I'm too old for this kind of partying, I remarked as I got ready to leave. I said goodbye to my daughter, thanked her for the fun, and drove home. As soon as I got out of my car, my next-door neighbor came running over. Steve was taken to the hospital by ambulance this morning, she told me. The front door was closed, but the lock was broken. I rushed inside and noticed some items had been moved, and I could smell the smoker on the deck. The coals were nearly out, but there were 2 slabs of meat on the grill. I removed them, put them in the refrigerator, and then checked the yellow pages. There were only 2 hospitals in the area. I called Mercy General and got lucky. Steve had been admitted, but they wouldn't provide any details over the phone. I quickly changed and left. "A triple bypass," I nearly shouted. "How much longer will the surgery take?" I asked. "About another hour," I was informed. "There's nothing you can do but wait. He has an excellent doctor and we caught it in time. After the surgery, he'll move to post-op and then be assigned a room. If you wait in the lounge, I'll come and get you when they're done." Can you say shit head? Because that's exactly how I felt. He could have died, I kept repeating to myself. When I get him home, I'll show him how much I love him and we'll get through this together. But I wasn't given that chance. I finally managed to locate him at the rehab clinic, but he still refused to see me. I was getting frustrated. Being stubborn is one thing, but Steve was taking it to an extreme. He must have somehow learned about what happened with Rick. I have no idea how, but someone must have seen us and informed him. I just need a chance to explain that nothing really happened, but he's been avoiding me like the plague. Ken and Judy weren't much help, but I discovered he had his laptop and sent him an email, though it was different from my last one. "Steve, I love and miss you. I don't understand why you won't let me see you. I know we've had some problems recently, and we've both said things in anger, but I love you and still believe you love me. Please give me a chance to explain anything you think I've done or not done. I need you, Steve, and I want to grow old and gray with you. If you won't let me see you, at least talk to me. The kids are also upset about not being able to see you. They came to the hospital, and when the nurse wouldn't let them into your room, John got quite angry. Please reach out to them as well because they're very concerned about you. Your loving wife." As I was composing an email to a salesman who had lost a major order due to sheer incompetence, Sandy's email arrived. I finished chastising the salesman, making it clear that if it happened again, he would be out of a job. Then I turned my attention to Sandy's email. I read it 3 times before crafting my reply. "Dear Sandy, let's get straight to the point. You haven't been a loving wife for over a year. Yes, I've gained weight, but when you ballooned during your pregnancy with John, did I belittle you or cut you off? Whether I'm slim or overweight, I'm still the same man you married years ago. Don't try to fool me now that I'm down. It's clear you have no interest in being intimate with me, as you made obvious the last time we were together. From what I've observed and discovered, it seems I've been replaced by Rick or someone else. I found your secret hideaway. At least you could have had the decency to change the sheets and take out the trash. I managed to dispose of the mattress and empty wine bottles. You're right about one thing. We will both grow old and gray, but it won't be together. Your soon-to-be ex-husband, I thought to myself. That should silence her, as I hit the send button. I compiled a list of all my assets. Sandy was to receive 50% of everything she was aware of, but I wanted to ensure that the things she didn't know about remained confidential. Ken informed me that if the court inquired, he would have to disclose my partnership status. However, if they only needed to verify my income, that's all he would provide. The cabin, which was a gift from my parents, would remain mine, and we could simply keep the cars we were each using for convenience. Everything else would be divided equally. I was content with that arrangement. Sandy responded, "What love nest? I have no idea what you're referring to. The only love nest I know of is our bedroom. If you have accusations to make, at least confront me directly instead of resorting to these childish games." I figured this method of communication was as effective as any, so I replied, "How dumb do you think I am? I went to the cabin and found all the evidence. Too bad I was there the week before my heart attack. Did you spend Friday and Saturday at his place, or did he get a hotel room this time?" I thought that would put an end to the conversation, but it wasn't long before she responded. This was the most we'd communicated in the past 4 months. "Call your daughter and ask Tina who spent Wednesday through Saturday morning with her at the college after you conveniently disappeared on Monday without informing me. And for your information, I haven't been to the cabin since our last visit about 4 or 5 months ago. So if that's all you've got, it's quite pathetic. Could I be mistaken? Regardless, the last 2 years of our marriage have been incredibly disheartening." "John, this is your dad." I started a conversation with my son. "Yes, I'm fine. I'm fine." "No, I don't want to talk about your mom right now," I added, and then I started bluffing. "I know you cheated on Cindy, and you need to stop before I call her and tell her everything." "Dad, I don't understand what you're talking about," John replied. "John, I was at the cottage and our neighbors saw you two there. You didn't even change the sheets, you idiot. What do you think Cindy will do when I call her? If she doesn't come for you herself, then her brothers will definitely visit you," I said, still probing. "It was only once, Dad. You have to believe me. It's not an affair. It was only once, and she doesn't even work for the company anymore." I could hear the desperation in his voice. "I'm going to say this once and only once. If I ever hear that you're having fun, or even suspect that you're attracted to another woman, I'll call Cindy immediately. From now on, she'd better be the happiest and most desirable wife in the world, okay? Pull out your head and grow up." "I'll do it, Dad. You can count on it. Please don't call Cindy," he pleaded. "All right, son, I need to go." "Remember what I told you," I said before ending the call. "Well, that was interesting," I muttered to myself as I considered my next step and wrote one final email to Sandy. "Seems you weren't fooling around at the cabin after all. It was our troublesome son. But that still doesn't justify your actions with Rick and whoever else. I thought I was still in love with you until that night, but not anymore. I suspect you still have feelings for me, but you haven't truly been in love with me for a long time. I'm sorry to say, I can't live like that anymore. Life is too short, and I learned that in a very painful way." That's how I wrapped it up. I was as much to blame as Sandy. We both knew we were drifting apart and did nothing to stop it. Between her work, the kids, and her social life, there was no time left for us. And with me focusing solely on my career, I wasn't any better. The only difference was that Sandy still looked as good as when I first met her, while I looked like someone out of Slobs R Us magazine. But no more. For the next 3 months, I dedicated myself to exercising and eating well. The first 35 pounds came off quickly, but then I hit a series of plateaus. I didn't give up, though. I was determined to reclaim what I had lost years ago, my waistline, and more importantly, my life. Sandy and I exchanged weekly emails to update each other on our lives, but we never met in person. After 6 months, I half expected divorce papers, but none arrived. Our emails mainly focused on our feelings about each other and our breakup, discussing the issues we saw in our marriage and why we failed to address them. As mentioned before, we were both at fault. Thanksgiving was unpleasant. The kids divided their time between us, her dinner and my dessert. John announced that Cindy was pregnant, and Tina said she'd finally earned her degree, or would by the end of the semester. I laughed and said I'd believe it when I saw it. They tried to pry information from me, but I told them it was none of their business. Tina got a bit annoyed, but backed off when I told her, enough is enough. Our emails during the holidays took on a new, more intimate and emotional tone, though I still can't quite explain how it happened. One night, Sandy asked if I remembered our first night together and how her roommate and parents walked in on us. I corrected her, saying that didn't count since we never really finished. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that we actually went all the way, and we reminisced about it for almost a month. For Christmas, I sent her a pair of emerald earrings. I knew she didn't have a pair because she had given hers to Tina on her 21st birthday. I included a note that read, "To replace the ones you gave up." Sandy never sent me anything for Christmas, but I wasn't really expecting anything. As New Year's approached, Ken reached out to me with a favor. "Steve, my wife's sister is coming to town and Carrie wants to take her to the New Year's Eve party at the country club. Her sister won't go alone and Carrie refuses to leave her at home. Can you be a stand-in date for New Year's Eve? Come on, Steve, I'll owe you one." He must have begged for a week before I finally gave in. What the heck, I was just going to sit in front of the TV anyway. Then I realized it was a formal event, and I no longer had a tuxedo. It took me 3 stores and a hefty bribe to get a tux and have it tailored in less than a week. Wait until Ken sees my expense report for December, I chuckled. John and his wife invited me over for New Year's Eve, but I told them I had plans. "You've got a date?" he asked. "Not exactly. I'm just chaperoning my boss's wife's sister," I replied. "You don't have to lie to me. I won't tell Mom," he said. "I'm not lying, and your mom probably already has plans for New Year's Eve, so let's just drop it," I said, slightly irritated. For the past 9 months, neither of us had brought up the topic of dating. I'd been to a few business lunches, but that was about it. I wasn't sure about Sandy. Someone as attractive as her probably had quite a few suitors. We were still married, but it was essentially just a formality. I guess we should probably discuss this after the new year, I thought to myself. I arrived at Ken's house by 7 o'clock. He let me in, and I met Sue, Carrie's sister. She was around 45 and quite attractive. I suggested we all go in one car, but Ken insisted on taking separate vehicles. "Look, after the dance, you can head home, and I'll take the 2 women with me, unless you plan on trying to get lucky with Sue," Ken said with a nudge, while Carrie told him to act his age, not his IQ. The venue was packed, and there were no open seats. I recognized most of the people at our table, who were impressed with how I looked. "Wow, Steve, how much weight have you lost?" "About 80 pounds, I replied. "I wouldn't have recognized you if I didn't know you so well," someone said. Dinner was decent, steak or chicken with vegetables and rice. I only ate half, not wanting to sabotage my diet. I had a glass of wine and slowly sipped my second while catching up with people I hadn't seen in 9 months. After dessert, the lights dimmed and the band began. Sue mentioned she wasn't much of a dancer, and I certainly wasn't either. After a few songs, I excused myself and started walking around the room. That's when I spotted her. She was stunning, about 5 feet 8 inches, with brown hair and a figure to die for. She wore a blue strapless dress that accentuated her every curve. I watched her for the next half hour as she danced a few upbeat songs with 3 older men. Whenever a slow song came on, she would return to her table and sit down. Despite being asked, she never danced a slow dance with anyone. I slipped a $100 bill to one of the band members and requested that they play 2 slow songs in a row, starting with "You Look Lovely Tonight." And for the second one, I didn't mind as long as it was slow. As the band began to play, I moved behind this angel and asked her to dance. "I'm sorry, I only dance to slow songs with my husband," she said without turning to face me. "Well then, I guess there won't be any problem," I replied as I reached in and took her hand. She spun around, about to say something, when she exclaimed, "Steve!" In the flesh. "Now about that dance," I said, leading Sandy onto the floor. "Steve, was all she managed to start. "Don't talk, just dance with me," I instructed Sandy as I pulled her close and we moved across the floor. When the second song started, I hugged her tightly to me, feeling her back and waist. When the band started playing Nights in White Satin, I hugged her even tighter. "Looks like someone missed me," Sandy whispered in my ear. She was right. I missed her, but I wasn't going back to the life I'd left behind. When the song ended, I didn't want to let her go, so I kept holding on. "I think we should talk sometime," I began, still holding her hand. "Why not now?" she suggested. "Don't you think your date might get a little jealous?" I asked. "What date?" "I came with John and Cindy," she replied, nodding towards them on the dance floor, and John smiled at me. "I'll be back in a second," I told her, heading for my table. "You set me up, didn't you?" I asked Ken. "No, John, it's Tina, and I set you and Sandy up," he said with a grin. "Sue didn't even want to come. I had to bribe her to come, so be a good girl, go away, I'll see you next week." When I returned, John and Cindy were already sitting at the table. "You two think you're very smart, don't you?" I asked, when Cindy and John smiled at Sandy and me. "I had no idea what they were up to," Sandy said, her eyes begging me to believe her. "Dad, I didn't tell you where we were going to be. Just, if you don't mind, spend New Year's Eve with us." Cindy interrupted us, saying, "Look, you two need to talk, and John and I need to head out. I can't drink, I've had plenty to eat, and I'm waddling like a duck on the dance floor in my condition," she added, rubbing her belly. "So, if you don't mind, we're going to leave." I had a million things I wanted to say, but Sandy quickly started talking. "You look great, Steve. How much weight have you lost? Where are you living now? I lost track of you after you moved out of the rehab center. Are you dating? Seeing anyone special?" She kept firing questions rapidly. It felt like she was trying to get all her questions answered immediately, probably because she was worried there wouldn't be another chance. "Let's get out of here and find somewhere we can talk," I said, grabbing her wrap and leading her to my car. "Where are we going?" she asked. "You'll see," I replied. We drove in silence for the first few minutes, both of us almost too afraid to say anything that might disrupt the mood. "I haven't been dating or slept with anyone, if you're wondering," Sandy finally said, without looking at me. "And I never slept with Rick or anyone else, no matter what you might have heard." "I know," I replied, keeping my eyes on the road. "What do you mean? You know? You were the one who accused me of cheating?" "I know that. And if I had proof you were sleeping around, we wouldn't be in this car together right now," I told her. She fell silent, lost in thought. Just before midnight, I pulled into the driveway of our lake house. Leaving the lights on, I unlocked the door and returned to the car to get Sandy. Once inside, I started the gas fireplace and opened a bottle of our favorite wine, pouring us each a glass. "That's how it all started and ended 9 months ago," I said, handing her a glass. "No, it didn't start there. It started much earlier. That evening, everything just reached its climax," she replied. "You have no idea how many nights I've been lying awake thinking about how much you must hate me for what I said and did, and that if you ever gave me another chance, I would make it up to you," Sandy said, and her eyes filled with tears. I reached out, pulled her to me, and kissed her salty lips. After that, our wine glasses remained untouched for a long time. It was an incredible intimacy. She fell on my chest when we started going crazy, and we clung tightly to each other, almost afraid to let go. "I think this is one way to start the new year with a bang," I said. I returned to the kitchen for glasses and a bottle of wine. "This conversation may take a while," I said, flopping back onto the bed. Raising our glasses, we drank to the new year, hoping for something better. "I know we have a lot to talk about, but I want to say again how sorry I am, and that—" I cut her off. "You're sorry. I'm sorry, the kids are sorry. Everyone is sorry, but it doesn't change anything. We need to change. We both need to rethink our marriage. I can't go back to what I left behind. I'd rather get divorced and start over, I told her. I don't want a divorce, Sandy said, starting to cry. Look, I don't want to get divorced either, but I can't go back to the life I had before all this happened, I explained. The house needs to be sold, and you can move into the apartment I'm renting now. We can decide where we want to live later. I have too many bad memories associated with this house. But this is our home, and I'm your husband. It should be obvious which choice to make. We'll sell the house, take the furniture we want, and either donate the rest or give it to the kids. I no longer want the cost, maintenance, or responsibility of a large house. A 2-bedroom condo is all we really need. I want to travel and experience all the things I've been putting off for years. I've been given a second chance, and I'm not going to waste it, I said. But we both have commitments and responsibilities. Forget them, I retorted. I'll put in my best effort at work, but that's it. No more weekends, business trips, or endless golf outings. I want my life back. I want to have fun and be excited about trying new things. And if I want to make love all day, I don't want a wife telling me she's not in the mood. Not anymore. Steve, I don't know if I can do all that, Sandy responded. Then you need to make a choice, and make it fast. The train is leaving the station and you're either on it or not. The wind on my face was warm as we rode the bike toward the third leg of our trip. I had never been to wine country before, and decided to spend a week visiting a few vineyards, staying overnight at each one. We left shortly after breakfast, and even with some sightseeing along the way, we planned to arrive by early afternoon with plenty of time for a tour. It had been ages since I last rode a bike, and it was only a 250cc Honda back then. The Harley we rented was a 1350cc beast, weighing over 1,200 pounds. What a difference. But it handled beautifully, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly happy and free with her arms around me. We arrived, checked in, and headed toward our cottage. I'm glad I came, she said, kissing me at the doorway. I'm glad you did too. I think we have just enough time to unpack before the tour starts, I said, tossing our bags onto one of the beds. She removed her jacket and then peeled off her shirt, standing with her hands on her hips. You have a choice. We can go on the tour, or I can give you a tour of my own, she said with a mischievous glint in her eye. I closed and locked the door. Her tour was far more enjoyable and rewarding. After showering, as we were getting dressed for dinner, I pulled her into my arms and kissed her. Any regrets? I asked. None, Carol replied. So let's get going. I'm starving. That's right, Carol. You see, Sandy missed the train. Steve, we're not kids anymore. We can't just throw everything away and start over, Sandy said that night at the cabin, trying to convince me. Let's give it 6 months and then talk about it again, okay? The divorce was finalized in just 3 months. Despite the fact that everyone thought I was crazy, I continued to live on. The children sided with her, which was expected, and Sandy decided to keep the house. We split almost everything equally, and Ken provided the court with data on my annual salary. I haven't spoken to Sandy or seen her since the divorce, and I hope she's doing well. One Saturday morning, I met Carol jogging 5 kilometers away. We both took the first places in our age groups, and after that, we started jogging together after work. One Sunday morning, after a long run, we took a shower together and spent the next 2 hours in intimacy. That was 8 months ago. Her only question is, will you ever grow up? God, I hope not.